Caribbean, representative of the countries and institutions, our specialists, our colleagues, and all our friends. Let me now pass to Spanish. Paso ahora a castellano.
I'd like to start by thanking the government of Ecuador for their cooperation throughout this past year, which was a foundational year for the alliance. And at the same time, I'd like to welcome the Minister of Security representing Ecuador here today. I'm also like to welcome taking the pro tempore presidency for this next year, Minister Patricia Bullrich, for being our hostess today and taking this alliance into its second year. I'd like to talk about organized crime now. It's one of the most urgent issues that the region is facing today. As we've mentioned before, the region represents 8% of the global population, but we suffer a third of all the crime around the world. Our homicides rate is 3 times higher than the average, and half of it is related to organized crime. This pays a high cost. Economic, of course, we lose 3.4% of GDP yearly, and that is more than we spend or invest on education and infrastructure. But it's not just about money. It's also about the suffering in the different communities, the suffering in business, and the youth that are not looking forward to their future. It is appropriate to be here today, gathering at the palace called Libertad, the cultural center Domingo Faustino Sarmiento. As a great educator, Sarmiento once wrote, if there were no difficulties, we wouldn't have any successes. And today, we face one of the largest difficulties of our times. And through this alliance, we can make it or turn it into a success for our region. If crime is organized, and it is transnational, then we should also be organized and be transnational as well, with coordinated actions based on evidence, and as we're doing today at a regional level. A year ago, we received the support of 18 countries and 11 strategic partners, and that's how this alliance was born for security, justice, and development. Today, there's 22 members and 12 partners. Almost all countries in Latin America got together. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, all of them. The purpose is clear, and that is to supplement the existing mechanisms that you have, close gaps that we still have, and act quickly, promptly on these 3 pillars. First off, protect vulnerable populations from violence and crime activities. Second, strengthening institutions of security, justice, and related sectors. And thirdly, interrupt financial flows, illicit financial flows and markets that support these activities. It is with great pleasure that I'd like to announce that within the past 12 months, we moved from a concept to actions. And most important, we've done it under the leadership of the ministries of the region. There were 3 working forces directed by ministries that gathered more than 20 countries to reach concrete actions. For example, under the first pillar, the countries launched the regional guidelines for human trafficking action, together with the UNODC. They launched activities at a regional level, and officials from all the region are using these tools to prevent, investigate crimes, and protect the victims, and cooperate, particularly in the border sections. But under the second pillar as well, we worked on the digital exchange of information on criminal background. It was adapted from Spain, which is one of our sponsors, and we are running a pilot program in Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile. And in Europe, the same application reduced time for criminal record checks of more than 1 month that would entail to go from one country to the other to 3 days. So we can see the progress in the regional cooperation. Under the third pillar, we're strengthening regional capacities to fight environmental and financial crime. As we've said before, we need to deprive oxygen from organized crime. Examples like the Amazon area, we mapped the illegal gold mining activities, and we are developing a methodology to identify gaps in the police capacities of this region, providing the countries with a clearer vision of where exactly they need to be more effective. In the Caribbean, for example, we're also working on illegal transnational financial crimes and recover assets. We are involving more than 60 officials in the law enforcement forces in these countries. But in order to improve money laundering and other illegal financing activities, we are also working within and changing within the IDB. We're creating a new citizenship security division under a new chief, Eduardo, who's right next to me. And this is the first time that we have a division chief within a multilateral bank. And to reinstate our commitment, in 2026, we will channel at least $1.5 million providing from our own capital, the bank's capital, to support the technical secretariat of the alliance. We are providing our own resources to support this organization. We are also offering loans. Let me share with you an example. We approved within our council a loan of $400 million to Ecuador. This is a PBL. It's a political policies budget financing for reforms where youth prevention, integration of police officers, financing and mining integration are the key pillars of it. In total, from the inception of the alliance, we have loaned $550 million for the prevention and fight against illegal financial activities. This is not just theoretical. It's providing us with results. Since we're gathering here today again, I'd like to take this opportunity to announce 2 new initiatives. First, I'm very pleased to announce personally, and that's why I wanted to visit Argentina, the launch of the Fast Response Force. This force offers a mechanism that is permanent, that can be activated when countries face different types of crisis or neighboring crisis. If a neighbor of yours is facing a particular crisis and they need fast resources, we are working within the bank to be able to cooperate fast and efficiently. This is very important within a multilateral bank where processes can take long time. So we reduced this timeline to 15 days, which is quite fast in the case of IDB and the processes we need to follow as safeguards. We will offer teams to solve crises, fast diagnosis, specific workshops, and short-term plans. We will help governments to coordinate police forces, prosecutors, and other institutions. We are providing this program with our own resources, as I mentioned, to help in this sense. When and where can this support be requested? For example, when there's an increase significantly in homicides, for example, this can be provided. Second situation, when there's evidence of criminal groups exercising power on certain territories, where we have to move fast and it's victim of expansion of criminal governance, or there's a crisis such as scandal, corruption, that is affecting the public trust in our institutions. That's what we call institutional vulnerability, and we need to act quickly. These are cases where we need to act quickly, and this is where IDB will provide you with resources. And not just resources, but our technical cooperation and support by our specialists. And the second initiative, so that is the first one, technical resources. The second one is the increase of financing and capacities for governments. We'd like to announce that for the next 3 years, we project a total of $2 billion in the operations of this new division of security. I'd like to say that $2.5 billion is more than what we've done in the past 16 years. So the next 3 years will represent more than 1.5 decades in terms of investment. In 2025, for example, we have some operations underway. I talked about PBL in Ecuador, but we also have an IDB loan for $177 million for Peru for a penitentiary reform. We've been working on $25 million loan for Uruguay to support the reinsertion of people that are coming out of the penitentiary system. In Argentina, we'd like to work in order to strengthen security, including police forces, the gendarmerie, the coast patrol, human capital, and the best operations. We'd also like to help modernize the judicial system with the new code that we need to implement. Moreover, we'd like to provide technical assistance in order to systemize evidence. I talked with Ministry Bullrich about the city of Rosario, and today we'll have a panel talking about that. And we'd like to systemize through examples in your countries, in your regions, for the rest of them.
And finally, I would like to say that our capabilities to bring resources, I mean, not only the IDB resources, which are never enough, we can bring resources from other partners, other countries. We have heard good news. Technical cooperation provided by Spain, 1.5 million for these response mechanisms, as well as prevention mechanisms. The UK as well. 6.5 million to the alliance focused on the Caribbean. And as I have said, we will provide our own resources and funding. Well, we are looking at the future, the horizon. This summit is seeking solutions. I understand that over these 2 days we will discuss cross-border cooperation, the fight against illicit financial flows, the protection of the youth, and the reform of prison systems. This, well, is something for the short term in your case, but it's also multidimensional, long-term exercise. I invite you to share lessons, ask questions, and forge alliances that will drive this work forward. Once again, I'd like to thank Ecuador for its leadership, the pro-temporary presidency, and I welcome the new presidency, Argentina, and the minister. I would like to thank the ministers who have led the 3 task forces, not only Minister Bullrich, but Daniel Marcher from Barbados, Jaime Gallardo from Chile, General Campos from Costa Rica, Amayo Saludo from Brazil, Rodrigo Nicola from Paraguay, and I would like to thank them for their leadership. And I would like to recognize that we have had very active strategic partner from the OAS, Interpol, PNUD, the World Bank, all working jointly. The alliance shows that Latin America and the Caribbean can give an effective response, and we can address organized crime. Together, we can strengthen citizenship and generate ideal conditions for sustainable growth in our region. Thank you. We'd like to thank IDB President Idan Goldfein, and we now give the floor to Argentina Security Minister Patricia Bullrich. Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank the Vice President, Ana Maria Ibañez, all the members of the IDB who have supported us. Thank you to the ministers of Argentina, their teams, who are part and parcel of this team to struggle against drug traffic, organized crime, and to enhance our people's security. Thank you to the National Security Secretary, Mr. Monteliva, the Director of International Operations, Alberto Foreg. Thank you to the leaders of the federal security forces, law enforcement, federal police, customs, border patrol service, prison services, airport security services, the representatives of Interpol, Eurofront, and of course the 22 representatives of the member countries. And thank you to everyone who has made a contribution to us. As a host country, well, we want to say welcome. It's an honor to welcome you in our country, in our capital city, Buenos Aires. Of course, I would like to thank, first of all, the IDB for this strong, sustained commitment to strengthening cooperation, international cooperation in the areas of security and justice, important areas. And this work has been taken very seriously since the inception of this alliance. And, of course, thank you to all the countries who have come on board and who have embraced this initiative, a collaborative task, and we have shared a common agenda. I would like to thank particularly the presidency held by Ecuador, who in this alliance have done excellent work with shared goals. and who, well, planted the seed, and the IDB has expressed some excellent results. And we will keep attaining more results in the operational area, in the technical area, at the institutional level as well, with economic support that will help us all implement these programs and attain these objectives. The consolidation, the strengthening of a common language is very important in our mind, because this debate on how to face, how to frame organized crime, cross-border criminal activities, who have lots of firepower. I mean, criminals find it very easy to do this because that's their goal, to generate systems to corrode our institutions, our states. They have endless economic and financial resources. And all this coordination helps us think and understand that cross-border work is important, but organization is more important. We have to work on both sides of the borders. And criminal activities reach Asia, Europe, the US. So this common task is strategic for absolutely everyone. Well, we believe that this fight against organized crime is reaching strong consensus. We all know that on our own, it's very difficult to fight against these criminals. That's why this kind of event, this kind of forum, makes it possible to develop strategies and tools which are more suitable and more effective. First of all, I would like to touch upon a topic which I deem very important, and we need furthering it. And we hope we can make it a reality within this alliance. And I mean a systematic exchange, an automated exchange of information between countries, organizations, and members. We deem it of the essence. We need a tool that provides a good profile of these organizations and members, of course, through secure access. It's good if every country can have online access to this kind of information, so we can prevent the circulation of these criminals. One of the challenges and obstacles that we face one of these challenges, as I was saying, is that we have to have some common ground to start. And some countries, make it possible to scratch off your criminal background. We think this is a hurdle, because one thing is someone who has completed a conviction, and the time the conviction has come to an end. A conviction has a beginning and an end. That's okay. And that's part of the rule of law. But another thing is deleting the past, deleting the previous criminal background. So you cannot be aware of who or how is getting into a country or operating in some countries. So we think that in order to have a systematic basis for this kind of work, we have to be able to analyze what kind of criminal background we can have, what information we can have about the members of criminal organizations or who have been involved in criminal activities on this continent. Also, I would like to add, because we consider it important from the point of view of criminal intelligence, the possibility of raising migration alerts, people who come and go between countries. And this is essential for our effectiveness if we want to be effective in persecuting the criminal organizations' members. In recent times, we have worked on something we also consider very relevant. You will hear our prosecutors later, and the members of the Office of Public Prosecution. We think that prosecutors in Iberoamerica and all IDB member countries, we need not only just information, but evidence, information, data that can be used as evidence in court. In many areas, we are working jointly, joint operations. And, the evidence gathered in one place, ideally that should be used in proceedings somewhere else in connection with the same criminal organization. This inter-institution assistance, or this inter-prosecution services assistance, provides robustness to criminal proceedings, criminal persecution events. So the evidence collected in one country should have legal validity in another country. So for us, that's absolutely essential, and we would like to include this in the agenda because we want to discuss it so we can make progress in the near term. Something I would like to add, something we have adopted as well as other countries. We have to differentiate criminal organizations from those criminal organizations who implement terrorist acts. In Argentina, we have made a decision. We call them terrorist drug trafficking organizations because they have certain features, specific characteristics, because it's much more than ordinary crime, I would say. I mean, the attempt at controlling areas in our countries, replacing the constitution or the law or international treaties by the law of the stronger, I would say. The law or the rules of the law, I mean, inverted commas, the organized crime, the rules of the criminals. And I think it's important, especially given its methodology, because they are scaremongers. They made an attempt at Rosario, in the city of Rosario. They wanted to impose extortion, this model of control, subjection. Recently, we have seen a phenomenon here in Argentina. They are present in an area, in a city, and they bring their families to Argentina, their children go to school, and they use these illicit proceeds to pay for school tuition. The money obtained through bloodshed many times. We have seen this in Ecuador. Fortunately, they have been arrested. The Choneros boss, who, his family was happily living here in Argentina, in Cordoba, in the center of Argentina. And, his children were attending local universities, and, well, they were paying everything with money, obtained through bloodshed, criminal activities in Ecuador. So that is why, for us, in Argentina, this link between organized crime and terrorism is something that we want to discuss very openly. And within this framework, this is very useful because this allows us to freeze the assets, the goods of these organizations. And we can also resort to migration red flags or warning alerts. Because if you commit a crime somewhere in a place, and then you send your family somewhere else, so they are away or far from the conflict or far from the violence that they themselves exert in their countries. That's why it's important to work together. This collaboration is key. Being able to coordinate demands, requirements in border areas, and also the use of ill-gotten money. Because, the thing is, when you use these criminal proceeds somewhere else, that's another offense. Because it's like calling it violence-born money. So we have to work on border security. We need border areas, are places of exchanges, illegal trade. Our borders are 9,000 kilometers long. And our border stretch, which is especially complex, in the north. And we'd like to share the plans that we have for these areas. And also, it's important to create border mechanisms without hindering trade. But these mechanisms should include technology, information that allows us to protect our communities from this illicit trade. Lastly, I would like to thank the IDB for this newly created alliance driven forward by the IDB, which is becoming a key element for our common work. So we can start fully implementing all these projects. They have already announced some assistance. I have to say a big thank you, Mr. President. And we, of course, we are more than willing to fully embrace all this work based on consensus, of course, because we need a consensus-based agenda. And we will drive forward the presidency of this alliance over the next term to work together to develop more operational capacity that will allow countries in the region not to face as many murders as we have seen, murders committed by organized criminals, or other offenses which should be addressed, like femicide, family violence, which are typical of our country. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful time in Buenos Aires. And thank you again for being here in our city, in our country, in this remarkable event. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the opening remarks by the National Security Minister, Patricia Bullrich. Would like to invite now all ministers and participants and representatives of the Alliance to take the family picture so that you can do so with the minister, who will be leaving soon due to other commitments. Thank you.
invitamos a todos.
Would like to ask everyone to return to your seats, please.
A continuación,
We will now start with the first session of this summit on the Alliance for Security, Justice and Development. And to that effect, would like to ask to come to the floor Eduardo Vergara, head of the Citizen Security Division at the IDB, who will introduce the session, and Ana Maria Ibanez, Vice President for Sectors and Knowledge of the IDB as well, who will share a presentation on the Alliance for Security, Justice and Development. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today in this alliance that is work composed of 22 countries and 12 institutions. It's an honor for us to be in Argentina, with whom we've developed a deep and serious commitment in terms of security and justice. And we are very pleased of the work that Ecuador has done, who is now moving on to the pro-tempore presidency to Argentina. I'd like to share a few things before giving the floor to our VP, Ana Maria Ibanez. This alliance's effort becomes now a response to a need, a very important need, a deep need in our region, and that is the articulation of the work of different countries and institutions around a higher good, which is the security of everyone living in our region. 2025 was the year where we created the Citizenship Security Division with the IDB, transforming it not only as into the first multilateral bank with such a division, but also highlighting that our strength as a bank is in our teams, that we have a team of specialists of very high level, locating in different countries, working on site with our governments of our region in terms of prevention, prisons, organized crime challenges, which make this team to be at your full disposal. The objective is to respond quick and effectively. Our president just shared the news of the creation of a new workforce, which Ana Maria will tell us more about, but also mechanisms to provide you with more agile mechanisms to give you responses to your countries and those who govern them. This asset is supplemented by the work of the Alliance with the roadmap that after a year of work is providing us with results, but also guiding us the way forward. The financial efforts have always been supported by the technical side of it, and this is what makes a difference. Since 2009, even though we've placed more than $3 billion in loans, what the president has shared with us is also a very important goal regarding the next 3 years, which will take us to 2.5 billion. There are important programs and operations like the ones we're taking forward in Peru and Ecuador have become specific, concrete results, and we look forward to making this even larger. And I'd also like to highlight that in the next few days, today, tomorrow, we'll analyze and dive deep in experiences and results of examples like Rosario, which, thanks to the actions and coordination of different public stakeholders, have allowed us to see results that will also address preventive actions and measures. And in that sense, would like to thank the presence of those that would share with us the Italian case and how mafia prosecution is also bringing new and very important lessons. We'll place a special focus on preventive measures, a red flag that becomes an action in terms of children recruitment in our region and investing in the institutional strengthening as well. Thank you once again for being here with us. Thank you for the Ministry of Security of Argentina for everything we've achieved, everything we've done together, the work with the Ministry of Justice, but above all, thank you for being with us today, representing different countries that are member states of this alliance and also the institutions. I'd also like to thank the teams of the division at the bank and our representatives here in Argentina for extraordinary work that they've been doing with very serious commitment, of which we feel honored and pleased, because this is our priority and our greatest concern of everyone and citizens in the region. Thank you. Welcome to Argentina. And I'd like to give the floor now to our VP, Ana Maria Ibáñez. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to be here with you, attending this summit of the Alliance for Security, Justice, and Development, that we consider IDB for it to be a key exchange space amongst governments, stakeholders, and other organizations that is very important to reach the goals we have ahead of us. I'd like to especially thank the government of Argentina for opening their doors for this discussion and debate that is so important for the region. And I also like to acknowledge the work that the Alliance has done. Throughout this year and before the temporary presidency, the work of Argentina has been very important. The government of Ecuador as well. This alliance was created in Ecuador a year ago in 2024, and you've been leading the presidency of this first year of the alliance, which was a very important year to set the foundation of what will take us forward. And as the president very well said, the alliance is not just one other initiative to respond to organized crime. The networks of criminal bands frequently operate regionally and globally, and they look for and exploit vulnerabilities when countries are not coordinated and are not acting jointly. No country can face this challenge alone. Minister Bullrich mentioned alone is difficult, and the alliance is very focused on the regional public, supporting countries so that these efforts can be supplemented and strengthened so that mechanisms are also strengthened at the national level. We believe it's important to fill these gaps of knowledge and information and act quickly amongst and upon emergencies, but also opportunities that might come up spontaneously, and would like to be there to support you and help you. Crime and violence are not new phenomenon in the region. You know that better than anyone, as we talked about in the first meeting of the alliance. The region has the highest homicides rates around the world. This is not new, and it has been the case for many decades and continues to be very high. This also creates pain and suffering to families that are victim of this crime, and also has a very significant economic impact in our countries, social effects, and very high human costs. The presence of organized crime is also not a recent phenomenon, particularly in certain countries in the region. These groups in past decades have focused on drug-related crimes, and these groups are changing, evolving drastically. We have three new phenomena occurring simultaneously. Criminal groups. These are the cross-border organized groups which are entering different countries, new territories in the region, presenting us with special challenges in the region, particularly Latin America and the Caribbean. We also see that there's a fragmentation of the local groups in some of these countries. And thirdly, they are resorting to new illegal markets that are complex, since these are illegal markets that allow for easy use of legal markets for money laundering. This is, of course, worrisome when we see the global homicide rate. We see that Latin America and the Caribbean is above the average globally in 12 of the 15 criminal markets that they're analyzing. This includes cocaine trafficking, weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and extortion, amongst other crimes that are arising. These groups cooperate amongst each other in a very frequent manner, in a very frequent way. They use opportunities very well, and they use technological resources and infrastructure and the use of highways so we can control organized crime. The answer should go beyond our own borders and beyond our own countries. Regional cooperation is then a must. It's mandatory for the control of organized crime to reach goals and objectives of each of the countries. These groups have proven themselves to have large changing and evolving capacities to adapt new circumstances. This means that solutions that might be applicable today might not be applicable in the next few years. So we need to be dynamic in the way we address organized crime. I'd also like to mention 3 emerging challenges that you have asked for within the alliance, and then I will show you what the progress has been and what we have achieved so that we finish with the Fast Action Task Force. The first challenge is very important, and it has significant impact on children and adolescents that suffer direct consequences of organized crime through 2 channels. They're victims of organized crimes, but also they are recruited by these organized criminal groups. We've also seen recruiting of children as young as 6 years of age. They operate very closely to schools and detention centers where some youth and adolescents are after some crime activities. They use economic incentives, emotional incentives, and they are used in different ways as informants, as micro trafficking figures, and they use them as sicaries as well. This creates dynamics that continue with exclusion and violence within these children and adolescents.
There is evidence as well that these criminal organizations have been aggressively recruiting on social media. They post videos on the social media showing the alleged advantages of belonging to these members. They sell this idea that a criminal life gives access to parties, social status, luxuries, and weapons. In a country with a survey was conducted, 30% said that they had joined these criminal activities through the media. Girls, particularly, face another challenge, which is dramatic. They face bigger risk to sexual exploitation and trafficking. And a second phenomenon, illegal mining. You have asked us to place special focus on this topic. Illegal mining has become one of the most profitable criminal markets, one which severely corrodes the environment, especially in the Amazon, as well as in many regions in Latin America and the Caribbean. When we zoom in the Amazonia, we see that there are 4,100 illegal mining activities or sites. Many, as you can imagine, are located in distant, far-off areas, and this exerts strong negative impacts on ecosystems and state institutions, the state authority, and it is a key source of proceeds for criminals. And for some groups, this is, more profitable than drug trafficking. Estimates, these are merely, how can I put it, rough estimates. We need more accurate information. They generate over $48 billion per year and finance around 38% of non-state criminal or armed groups. This is a general estimate. It's important to have this information for Latin America and the Caribbean, and we know the figure is quite high. Gold is one of the metals that armed groups are using. Mainly, gold is extracted in some areas with very little supervision. You don't need sophisticated technology. In territories where illegal mining is closely related to other crimes. So you see this convergence of many criminal activities, and these activities are growing. The third phenomenon is synthetic drugs. I mean, from two different approaches. First is the trade in synthetic drugs. And the second thing, something very warning, is the use of these drugs by our populations. Cocaine remains a significant challenge. 2024 was the year of highest cocaine production in the history of the region. But criminal groups have diversified significantly and have been including into their portfolio the production and trade in synthetic drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. What they do is what Minister Bullrich said when she spoke about border areas. These criminals are taking over of these areas for the traffic in chemical precursors, and they are finding legal loopholes in the system which facilitate this trade, and they adapt their production and manufacturing methods. These organizations mutate very quickly and they morph into new groups. In these markets, we have seen collaboration between and among different groups. That's cross-border cooperation, you know. And this seems to be linked to other crimes, such as arms trafficking and money laundering. Another aspect, the use of these drugs. This is a growing challenge in the region and normally comes hand in hand with involvement in criminal activities. We don't have very standardized or accurate or reliable information. We have limited information only. But this consistently shows two things. First, the use of cocaine is very high. The region with the highest proportion of patients under treatment because of cocaine use. And secondly, some countries have been reporting, and we see this in surveys, an expansion growth of synthetic drugs. And you see these three phenomena, as well as some other issues, we see a convergence. And this is what we see in the region, high murder rates and a involvement of criminal groups in these activities. 50% of all murders in Latin America and the Caribbean are associated or the result of organized crime. And what we see is that institutional response is rather limited. Out of 10 intentional murders, above 4 suspects have some kind of formal contact with law enforcement, and under 2 are finally convicted or eventually convicted. 80% of all murders remain impune. If we focus on the resilience rate, 54% of all countries in the region have a score below the global average. This measures countries' capabilities to address organized crime in an integral and holistic fashion. So, what has the alliance been doing over the last 12 months? Well, less than 12 months, as a matter of fact. In recent months, I will say. So, this is the leadership. The alliance is yours. We, as the IDB, are only the technical secretariat. It is up to you to define goals, the agenda, needs. See, under the leadership of 22 countries and 12 strategic partners. And we have all been working together. Our year has been very dynamic, very active. We have had meetings with the 3 technical groups, with member countries, also meetings with strategic partners, and sessions with non-regional countries who are members of the IDB. We have engaged in academic exchanges and also exchanges with ministers of the economy in the region. This is key because it is up to the ministers of finance to define the budget for these topics and tasks. We have produced several initiatives, several outputs. I will give you a very short summary. The first pillar, prevention and protection of the most vulnerable populations. We have made progress in 4 areas here. First, a series of guides or handbooks, 5 in all, to address human trafficking. Also, an online course on this topic developed with the UNODC, the first publication which systematizes the model of integrated service centers for youngsters with PUC, and this is being applied in Brazil, Costa Rica, and Jamaica, and also conducting impact assessments to identify the effect and also why and what has worked and what not. We are also adapting this for Ecuador. Finally, a policy note on the prevention of minor recruitment. Second pillar, strengthening institutions. Here we have made progress in 2 areas. The first one is the exchange of criminal background information, so we can have safe, real-time exchange between countries. We have had the support of the European Union. 1 country has already adopted this system, and we hope this can reach other countries. The second area is a publication on the right, which looks into protective factors contributing to convicts' social reentry. The third pillar is focused on illicit financial flows and markets, and we have focused on 3 areas. We have done this with strategic alliances and you yourselves. The first, the description of offenses and crimes. We have produced this work involving gold mining for better prevention, which focus on the entire gold chain, end to end, and identify areas where authorities can act, which have also supported CARICOM impacts with the creation of Environmental Crime Unit for Intelligence. That's for the Caribbean. And with Interpol, we have been working on the community of practice on financial crimes. And we are also devising a methodology to measure law enforcement capacities in the area of environmental offenses. So at the IDB, for us, it's important to produce knowledge for countries and for beneficiaries, the target audience of our programs. And we believe that they should be at the core of the alliance's work so that everyone can have specialized knowledge, which allows you to make or helps you make decisions. And this is important to strengthen policies, interventions in the region. We believe the alliance becomes stronger when we fully understand the root causes and the phenomena that are being targeted by our activities, when we are fully aware of the impact and all the details and information about organized crime. And solutions, effective solutions, should be also measured and assessed. It's important to have more data, more reliable, rigorous data for decision making. And all these data have to be produced and collected in real time because they have to be practical for decision making. We will share 2 examples. The President has already mentioned this Ecuadorian case. Ecuador has seen an increase in crime over the last 4 years. Murders have grown by around 650%, extortions 690%. The government has implemented measures to strengthen institutions and to protect them from crime. This strengthening is crucial to control illicit economies, to put a check on money laundering, and customs and border security is also key. So we believe that this will result in the strengthening of institutions, justice, and the rule of law, and will create an enabling environment for more social inclusion and economic growth. What has our role been? Well, we have worked with two loans, 24-25, to increase the impact of our interventions. The first loan for 155 million. The second was approved in July this year, a loan for policy reform for 400 million. The goal of these two loans is to prevent. Prevention is key. We focus on two areas, the prevention of minor recruitment and also the strengthening of community resilience. Secondly, developing investigative capacities and the capacities of police reform using technology and data, and better interagency coordination, which is also key to keep a check on criminal groups. And finally, policy measures and rules against money laundering, including termination of ownership and the curbing of illicit markets such as illegal mining. It's been a pleasure to support Ecuador. These are flagship operations for the IDB. First one, 155 million. First time we give a loan to work with the country against organized crime. And the second, the first loan for policy reform involving organized crime. And also the first in the new division for citizen security. The second one is an example of technical cooperation. We consider it lays the foundations for your future work. And it's an example of an initiative at a regional level. It seeks to develop sustainable Amazon, encouraging cooperation between the countries in that area of the Amazon in order to strengthen law enforcement's capabilities. It promotes the use of innovative technology, satellite images, artificial intelligence, gold isotopic analysis. Secondly, we are supporting a process for enhancement at the Center for International Police Cooperation in the city of Manaus. They focus on environmental crimes. We have been conducting training sessions, and we are implementing these criminal guidelines. We are providing information and giving support in Suriname, Brazil, etc. All these countries. Finally, the Quick Response Task Force. We want to give a reply to what you have asked for, more agility in the face of your own needs. We have created this fast response mechanism. Criminal groups know how to adapt to new realities, and we have to follow suit. We cannot fall behind. That's why we have developed this group against organized crime and violence. The members are experts. Some are here in the room. They are well renowned, and they will provide specialized technical assistance in an agile, timely manner to Alliance country members when facing emergencies, when there are new issues which can escalate if not addressed, and also taking advantage of some windows of opportunity. The objectives to provide specialized technical assistance, specialized training, and also the first steps for technical interventions and offering assistance in the case of crisis, legal frameworks, etc. We will be doing this in 3 areas. Fast technical responses, that's express diagnosis, action plans for the short term, and support to work with prosecution offices, prison services, law enforcement, governments. Specialized technical training, tutorship, mentorship, crisis management, exchange of good practices, and strategic advice when we have a window of opportunity for scalable, sustainable programs. This will be activated at the request of the countries when you need so, if there are escalation risks or emergencies, or if you are facing critical situations. The experts, well, have a significant trajectory, internationally renowned, and they are familiar with different topics, money laundering, reforms. Here you have their information. They have lots and lots of practice, and they have deep knowledge in measures against organized crime. And many have dealt with crisis, so they do know what you may need. They are here available, as I have said, and we at the IDB are here at your disposal for whatever you may need. It's a great pleasure for us to help all of you.
In order to wrap up, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the valuable work of all the members, of the partners of the Alliance. This is your Alliance. We're just here to support you. And it's been your commitment, your leadership, which have been key to make progress throughout the year. I would also like to thank the IDB team who is here with us today, the division chief, Emilio Pineda, and all the group of the division, which is so committed with the Alliance, Argentina for hosting us during these 2 days, Ecuador for the significant work in this past year. So with that, we'll just continue working for the next 2 days. Thank you. Would like to thank the participation of Eduardo Vergara and Ana Maria Ibanez, and would like to remind you that at the end of the day tomorrow, we'll have 2 site visits, the Scientific Police Department of the National Police of Argentina and the Coast Guard of Argentina. You will find more information and details on each of the site visits on the agenda, and also there will be a registration form for you to enroll to the site visit of your interest. We will now take a coffee break of 15 minutes and would like to invite you to go to the Salón de los Escudos outside of this hall for a warm coffee, and at 10:45 we'll resume with the next session. For our virtual session, we'll resume the session in 15 minutes. Thank you.
a los presentes.
We'd like to ask everyone to go back to your seats to start with panel number 2. Thank you.
Continuamos la Cumbre Regional de Seguridad y
Let's now continue with the summit and the alliance about security, justice, and development. Now we'll move to the Rosario case. As highlighted as an example, a case of dealing with organized crime through a coordinated and comprehensive action within different levels and sectors of the government. To that effect, I'd like to ask Federico Angelini, Undersecretary of Federal Intervention, Ministry of National Security of Argentina, Alejandra Monteolives, Security Secretary of Argentina, Julian Cori, Undersecretary of the Federal Penitentiary Services, Ministry of National Security, Diego Iglesias, from Procunar, and our moderator, Diego Fleitas, National Director of Institutional Transformation, Ministry of National Security of Argentina. Good morning. We have a great panel here to discuss about one of the most highlighted cases with its successes. That's the case of the city of Rosario, where we witnessed a significant decrease of homicides within the city, to which we have 4 panelists who will speak from different perspectives. This is a conversation. The Secretary for National Security, from her perspective, then Federico Angelini, who is the Undersecretary of Federal Intervention, who will give us more details about the articulation at the local level, the Undersecretary Julian Curi, who will talk about the penitentiary services, and finally, Diego Iglesias, the prosecutor in terms or in charge of drug-related crime, which played a very significant role from the judiciary perspective. I'd like to be quite tight on our timeline. I'd like to ask for law and order, so let's respect our time. You have 8 minutes each. I'll let you know when you are 1 minute away, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So, Madam Secretary, you have the floor. Good morning, and thank you, Diego, for the introduction. Thank you to the colleagues of this panel, and welcome to all of you who are coming from abroad. We, as the National Ministry of Security, are very pleased to host you. We believe that this is a key development together with the IDB. And this panel is really addressing a very significant experience, and that is the Plan Bandera, or the flag plan in English. For those of you who are not aware of the reality and distribution of our country, let me share with you that Rosario is 350 kilometers away from Buenos Aires, from where we are right now. It's a 1.3 million people city, and this is the door, the entrance or exit door, depending on where you're looking at from the Jairo corridor. This is the Paraná River. This is, I would say, the most important, the main transported highway. And at the beginning of Patricia Bullrich office, at the end of 2023, the homicide rate was of 4.4 every 100,000 inhabitants. But the city of Rosario had a 5-time fold on that figure, and that was for December 2023. And the Plan Bandera that started to be implemented at the beginning of 2024 as a result of a definition, articulation with the national government of the province, with the authorities of the city of Rosario, I would say is the most relevant case, the most significant case for the country, a national practice of how a strong political decision can transform within a certain time frame, a short time frame, a critical reality addressing homicide and organized crime. Not too long ago, we heard that 50% of homicides, as Ana Maria mentioned, 50% of homicides in Latin America is related to organized crime. But let me supplement this information, and that is that the same metric in 2013 showed that homicides related to organized crime in Latin America was 24%. So in 10 years, 12 years, we have double the figure. So at a global level, let me say that while in Latin America, homicides related to organized crime are 50%, at a global level, they are 22%. And this proves how a region with 9% of the global population continue to be the scenario of the third highest rate of homicides around the world. And this is how we can explain the reach of the Plan Bandera. The implementation of said plan had a main focus, and that is to address drug-related bans that would control certain specific sectors around the city of Rosario, which would impose their law through very violent means. And based on this reality of these homicides that were 5 times higher than in the rest of the country, and the city would live under fear, where some homicides were organized and directed from within the prisons. So the objective was to occupy the territory again, neutralize organized crime, and of course, give the city back to the Rosario people, but also to recover Rosario for Argentina. And that was the great goal, the great intention of Plan Bandera. This is where we continue working on 2 fronts that we can translate into 2 verbs, and that is controlling and having consensus. Controlling this follow-up, this monitoring, this detailed follow-up on a weekly basis allowed us to react with time upon certain deviations of the plan. And this is sometimes the most important problem that some of the security plans might entail. And on the other hand, the creation of consensus, which is a key pillar within an effective management system. And this consensus, this ongoing discussion with the provincial authorities, with the municipal authorities, with the federal justice, with the federal justice of the justice system of the province of Santa Fe, all of this allowed us to have a federal unit. This morning, our minister greeted and thanked the 5 chiefs that are here with us, our 5 forces: Gendarmerie, Federal Police, Penitentiary, Coast Guard, and the Air Forces. All of this, together with the police of the province, created a working mechanism that has a specific dynamics that allowed us to create specific strategies that allowed us to have such results. This Plan Bandera had a staged implementation. I'm looking at the clock here. I don't want to go beyond, my Diego Fleitas suggestion of law and order, but one of the key values, and maybe this is where we change or break this cycle of these programs that we've seen, especially those who've been working on this for many, many years. We thought and we wrote and we established that the reducing homicides was a vast reach, a long-term activity. However, the Plan Bandera would actually be very disruptive in this sense, because only after 10 months of implementation, Plan Bandera managed to reduce 75% of homicides in those areas where the federal forces had direct participation, and 65% of homicides in the city of Rosario. This decrease was a contribution to the reduction of homicides nationally, but also a contribution of the actions against organized crime within the region. Thank you, Alejandra. Very interesting remarks. Federico Angelini, the Undersecretary, will give us more details and share his perspective from a local view and how this was dropped to 65%. This was not very sophisticated. This was really using quite standard mechanisms. So, Federico, why don't you tell us more about this? Alejandra very well mentioned it. It was a political will, a political decision. We've seen in the past 10 years how homicides rates were showing a specific trend, except for Minister Bullrich office, they were always above 240 homicides a year. And when Minister Bullrich was in office, we suggested something similar, and the local authorities of the province declared that they had the feeling that the national authorities wanted to obstruct with the local authorities, but we just wanted to prevent what we knew was going to happen if we didn't act quickly. Before the implementation, and based on this political will of Minister Bullrich and President Milei, we had to internally coordinate between and amongst the federal forces in order to work as a unified office, as a unified division, so that we didn't work individually. It might sound simple from the discourse perspective, but each of the forces acts differently, and they had to all jointly and coordinately act under this plan. We also had to coordinate and have consensus with the police forces of Santa Fe and Rosario, where we didn't really have much or high levels of trust. The first meetings, no one would speak. We would just look at each other. And this was a process that was very difficult to address, but it was key for us to be able to implement the deployment and the Plan Bandera. From that point forward, we started the deployment process through a very detail-oriented study of the crime behavior in the city of Rosario. 80% of these type of crimes would take place in 17% of the territory. Based on the study that was defined and based on statistics, we defined 8 zones or areas where crime was quite aggressive. We started working with the federal forces. They took over certain areas, and I have to acknowledge that we're very proud of how they worked with the most complex areas within these 8 zones that we had previously defined, because when we looked at the stats, it was very clear that these were the zones and areas where the highest rates of violent crimes would take place. We created heat maps so that we could define behaviors of these types of crime within these action zones. We deployed intelligent monitoring, high visibility, because we needed for the society in Rosario to understand that the national state was supporting the province and was not abandoning the city of Rosario as in previous occasions. We've also defined higher authorities together with the Secretary and the National Ministry of Security in terms of the implementation of the Plan Bandera, where we communicated on an ongoing basis with our society. We had to leave behind a very strong belief where a national minister said that drug-related crimes won over. People in Rosario would believe that drug trafficking was the law to be applicable in the city. And we had to move to something that the minister has always said: the only applicable law in Rosario and in Argentina is our national constitution. So it was very important to constantly behave and communicate what the federal forces were doing. Working tables on a weekly basis with the province to define deployments, to define new events that might take place throughout the following week. That was fundamental so that we were not caught by surprise. Again, we had intelligence weekly working tables within the federal services, but also working with the criminal unit of the province of Santa Fe, and a biweekly working table together with local authorities, because the federal forces continue to work with the public ministry and the federal forces. When we talk about violent crimes, we talk about small drug-related crimes and the control of territories by different bands that occupy these territories to sell and trade drugs. This is how we explain most of these violent crimes. And this was very important, because if there was a zone that was generating more action, more movement, we would have had to act quickly with investigations and raids, so that if these networks wanted to continue working, they knew that we would be on their case. I would also like to talk about provincial and national laws that were amended, or new legislation that was implemented, like the anti-mafia law, the extension of the genetic data, the repeat offenders legislation to work against organized crime, and a very important law at the provincial level, which was the defederalization of the small drug-related crimes. This was important so that we had ordinary justice or law that would have more interaction with these smaller type of crimes and leave other types of crimes to federal law and justice. 65% of reduction in the homicides rate, 75% in the zones and areas where the federal forces were present, and the decrease of victims of firearms, and the reduction in 50% of gunshot events in private property. Criminal organizations would threaten families for them to abandon their families and convert these houses into centers of distribution, and business people were threatened because if they did not pay these networks, they would actually attack their businesses and their stores, which clearly affected the business life of the city of Rosario. Thank you, Federico, for that. This was very interesting indeed. From the penitentiary and dissuasive actions, you managed to achieve these results. And one other aspect, as I said, is the penitentiary aspect, training, but also insertion and control of criminal activity. And we need to highlight the Undersecretary of Federal Penitentiary Services under the director of Julian Curi. Vice President, Undersecretary, dear colleagues, I'd like to start by highlighting the two pillars that were key to create this reduction in criminality in Rosario. On the one hand, the political decision of Minister Bullrich, this was a strong, robust decision to guarantee public security. This was a key factor. We can then share more details about tools and management elements at the penitentiary level. But without her decision, this would have not taken place. It's easy to show Minister Bullrich because we all know her, but there's one other factor that speaks about the micro scenario, these relations between complex criminals, and this has to do with the federal penitentiary service. And that is why I'd like to thank and acknowledge their work, those that are daily working with these criminals. Chief Reich, Darío Cáceres, Omar Medina, the high-risk chiefs, and of course, beyond the chiefs, those that are on the front line, because nothing that I'm sharing with you today would be possible without the activity of other under-chiefs and under-secretaries, for example, Mr. Lencina. Everything that happens in Rosario can be done because of these two very important factors.
When we assumed the leadership of the Secretariat and the National Prison Service, we focused on two key tasks: recover control of our prisons and correctional facilities. In order to do that, we had to and needed to know for sure what we had inside the prisons. I mean, people, these gang leaders, these senior criminals, those who organize crimes and offenses in Rosario. Otherwise, if we did not have that information, it was impossible to find a solution. What we wanted was to develop some kind of normative rule, and to address the problem based on scientific information, because all of these tools, as you know, have a great impact on inmates' imprisonment conditions. So what were the two parameters that we adopted in order to implement this detection system? Risk as a scientific measurable element, as an objective element. And we resorted to the United Nations Convention on International Organized Crime and the Mandela Rules. And we devised a protocol through an administrative resolution laying down our operation. We were able to start classifying, sorting the inmates in our prison system in Rosario. And we revived an old tool, as my dear friend has said, because we wanted to know what there was inside. Prison intelligence, yes, prison intelligence. We had to resort to the legislation in order to know who were the inmates. We had to be familiar with their characteristics. After we completed this stage in November, that was very early, based on a ministerial resolution, we decided to implement the comprehensive management system for high-risk inmates. This included certain protocols and guidelines by the National Director of the Prison Service. Essentially, this tool, this mechanism, included the need to manage these criminals. We have 12,000 inmates in the system. So this system had to target those criminals which pose two risks. I mean, the risk that they might flee and leading criminal bands or gangs or groups from inside the prisons. We developed a management system which includes certain components. I will not delve into all of them. For example, accommodation. All the high risks. We started with 42. We have 1 to 2, we put them all together. All high-risk criminals were sent to criminal unit 1 and 2 in Ezeiza and in Marco Paz cities. Once they were all in these two places, we sorted them out internally so that these criminal groups could not operate. So we partially dispersed them, scattered them about, and we separated them from the rest of the prison population. These inmates can only have contact with a very limited group of people, staff, I mean. They are subject to a different visitors regime, a different treatment in general. We separate the wheat from the chaff, let's say. So when visitors came into the prison, you had the visitors of high-risk criminals and low-risk criminals. So we had to develop specific strategies. Then, we have a kind of horizontal system, as we call it. There is a head, of course, but each area has another head or boss. And there is a kind of panel bringing everyone together, and they discuss the measures that should be adopted. There is no single voice. I mean, this is within the prison system, but there is a kind of pyramidal system for decision-making, joint decision-making, if you get what I mean. So we focus on specific security measures, and we place the biggest focus and the biggest work on electronic surveillance in the areas and wards where these criminals are accommodated. Before, we did not have electronic systems to prevent communication between inmates and those outside the walls of the prison. Now we have a very rigorous system for phone calls to check communication between inmates. We are very rigorous. Inmates are sorted into groups of no more than 5 inmates or persons. Family visitors, every 15 days for 1 hour, and they can have no physical contact, no bodily contact allowed. Phone calls, only one call once a week for 20 minutes. Your number has to be included in what we call a white list, previously approved. This required lots and lots of training for the prison staff and incentives. I mean, economic incentives, benefits, because, they have to work in such a hard environment. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, probably you have loads more to share. That's going to be next round. I have to give the floor now to Mr. Diego Iglesias, General Prosecutor at Procunar. They are specialized in drug trafficking. Maybe I should point out that in Argentina, the office of public prosecution is responsible for criminal persecution. So they play a very significant role, and they have a lot of autonomy in their job. So we're all ears. Very good morning. I would like to thank the IDB authorities for this invitation. Thank you to the ministry's authorities. Well, my point of view is, the activity from what we do as prosecutors, investigation into criminal phenomena in the city of Rosario. I will be rather more critical of our work as those responsible for investigation. And I have to travel back in time to understand how come we arrived at this point. Now, the current reality today is very different from the reality a few years ago. But this reality, why, has a multifaceted series of causes. The political will changes, and the lack of political will results in problems. But the justice sector has played a role in the creation of this reality. We started working, especially in Rosario in 2017, through the creation of an office. You know, my office has a presence in the city of Buenos Aires, but has competence and jurisdiction on all the country. We have only 2 offices on the field, in Salta in the north and now in Rosario. So these 2 places, offices, have different realities, I would say, and different links with crime. When we reached Rosario, we started working on 3 pillars: investigation, interagency cooperation, and international cooperation. What we did was to try to work focused on, well, our daily work or competence. What we detected is no criminal analysis in investigations. That was the previous administration. I remember a meeting, well, and all the prosecutors detected that there were 3 prosecution offices in the same area, 3 different cases, 3 offices with different law enforcement units in a piece of land, you know. That's silly. The thing is, at the very beginning, criminal organizations in Rosario were family businesses, I would say, with a strong presence on the territory. So you could not have 3 different drug dealers from 3 different groups on the same block. But we had 3 different forces, 3 different prosecutors on the same block. I remember what the minister said back then when we spoke about criminal intelligence. That was like an insult, a 4-letter word, yeah, sort of. And one of the first things, obstacles we had to overcome, you know, was that. That was happening just 5-6 years ago. That's why we are right here now. We started working in a coordinated fashion. You know, the Office of Public Prosecution has been responsible for criminal investigations in Rosario. Was in our hands. A few years ago, was in the hands of judges. Yeah, we had examining judges or investigating judges. In Rosario, you know, in a federal court, you might have 50 workers because they are responsible for investigation, but the prosecutor has only 10. And in Rosario, the judges, okay, gave all the work to prosecutors, even if they had the resources to do so. But we didn't. And that created a huge backlog, yeah, which had a very negative impact. In 2019, remember the legislative reforms? Well, we passed a new law in Argentina, and we focus on interagency cooperation. Remember, this new law, was passed, law number 27502, and this forces all the players, all the actors with jurisdiction on drug trafficking. There are 2 aspects, micro and macro. Yeah, we had to share information, sit down and discuss. Yeah, you have an adversarial system maybe in your countries. Here it's different. Yeah, and we wanted to share information. Culturally, it's very different to change your mindset. It took a long time, but now we are sharing information. We signed 2 agreements between the prosecution and the rest of the system, the courts of law, and I have to thank the work done by them. Yeah, when nearly all of the drug organization leaders were convicted, yeah, we did it before this local system did it there in Rosario. That's part of my criticism, arriving late. And there was another problem. We started incarcerating in federal prisons inmates with long convictions, life sentences. That's not common in federal systems. And we detected in 2021, roughly, that those life sentenced inmates were running criminal organizations beyond the wall of the correctional facility. So there was no problem for them. They were giving orders, issuing, directives using cell phones. Yeah, we created a group of prosecutors. We produced 3 reports. The current authorities did not pay any attention to these reports. Now the new authorities have warmly welcomed our way of working, our reports, and I think this is a huge landmark. Many of these murders were ordered from inside the walls of the prison. I don't need to go to Italy for you to understand how this works. But we have had, extortive kidnappings organized and from inside the prison using a landline, for instance, or a cell phone. And I will be wrapping up. The corruption produced and generated by this type of work and the operation, how it worked in Rosario. We have convicted the head of the intelligence of the local province forces, the former chief of the leader of the National Intelligence Service. Provincial prosecutors have been convicted, and one of the 2 federal judges is facing charges in court right now because he had the duty to investigate. A federal judge shared or had the same accountant as a big drug dealer in Rosario who tried to flee a maximum security prison using a chopper. So, coordinated work, interagency work, international cooperation, and we need a focus. Thank you so much. You touched upon very important issues. Well, in criminal intelligence, there's no one on the panel specialized. Yeah, it's normally misunderstood. It's an important input for investigation. But not only in Argentina, but in many countries, there are issues with criminal intelligence. Let's start the second round. Let's do an exercise. Can you share something that you have still on your head, or any remark about problems, current challenges, good practices? What would you have done differently? You don't have to answer all of these questions, but here you have a menu for you to choose from. Remaining obstacles, good practices. What would you have done differently, or something of the sort? Thank you. Well, I would go back to 2 lessons which summarize what have been discussing in this panel. And I want to enlarge a concept. When we say political will, I would add an ability to engage in a dialogue and engage in a consensus. We have a federal government, the federal government, provinces, and municipalities, and they have to work together. And many times, the political party is different, as in the case of the province of Santa Fe and the city of Rosario. However, the Minister Bullrich, the governor, the authorities of the city of Rosario, decided to take the bull by its horns, regardless of their political party, regardless of their political differences. Their intention, their goal was to address the problem and find the solution for good. And I think this leads to the second big learning. Something common in the region. One thing is speaking about, and another is putting it into practice. Evidence-based decision-making. We, for some time, have been speaking about the impact of evidence-based decision-making, because the introduction, the use of this evidence, which is not only data, information, this data, this information requires an analysis so that this becomes real information and ultimately knowledge for those responsible for implementing the security policy or those who have to implement strategies and make decisions. When you uphold, embrace all of this, uncertainty decreases, and with the Bandera plan, we have seen it with other interventions as well. And this also enhances citizens' legitimacy. And we see it day in, day out. We see it in citizens' behaviors in Rosario and in the rest of the country. So I would definitely underscore these two elements. Good practices, what the Secretary has just said. We have to resort to evidence. We have to clearly analyze data. No murder this week, but mind you, many more people were injured by the use of guns, more gunshots. I mean, what's happening? What's going on here? And this is key to then react and respond smartly. I mean, share information with prosecutors, federal system, the non-federal system, provincial and federal law enforcement offices. We should share information.
We need to urgently interact with the national penitentiary services. This will prevent future actions in the short term. This is key for what we are trying to do here, and also something that is very important, I believe, and that is the results, the qualitative results. We have a quantitative reduction of homicide rates, the reduction of gunshots. Rosario is now back a thriving city. Rosario receives tourism again. Rosario hosts international events, sports events. All of that had disappeared from our city. The city was completely stigmatized, rightfully so. And this has changed drastically again. We had record high tourism visits in our winter break, and this is very important for Rosario, regardless of hard figures and quantitative stats and figures. And finally, if I may add, we need to trust the plan. Only 3 months after the implementation of Plan Bandera, we had drug-related attacks in order to stop everything we've done, so that this policy would actually go backwards instead of forwards. And we trusted 100% what we had implemented, and far from complying with the wish of these criminal organizations that would include extended visit plans, that included the disappearance of high profiles, etc., we implemented controls and strengthened the plan. And at the end of the day, beyond reviewing certain tactic actions and knowing that we will have better or worse days, we understood and continue to understand that the plan works. It's a short, medium, and long-term plan, and this is something that unfortunately we had not seen before in many, many years with the issues of the city of Rosario. One of the quality sports events, one of the important things is the return of Fideo Di Maria. I just wanted to add that the regulation, the legislation of high-risk system has an ongoing revision because challenges are ongoing as well. And we see the need for daily action. For example, when we thought of the system, we had contact visits. In one of these contact visits, we could detect that one of the inmates would give the relative a written order to go kill someone. So based on that, we changed this procedure thanks to the resolution of the minister. This is not just for inmates, but also from a legislative perspective. The penitentiary service to which these inmates are subject to has a high level of law cases. We have 100 inmates, and we responded to 1,000 habeas corpus. We have legal proceedings and lawsuits. You need to understand that the penitentiary federal system is a controlled system. There's many control bodies. We have the Prisons Committee, the General Penitentiary, the Commission on Torture, and beyond these committees and law cases, we could respond to them, and we need to have a large legal team where we think of how we can defend the structure, the legislation. We have a legislation that is strong, robust, based on science, and that's why we can work on these lawsuits. The high-risk system is very well organized as well, not just for us, but also because we have these high-risk practices were transmitted to the penitentiary population at large. We implemented the revision processes in almost 100% from one year to the other. That is, in other words, so that I can explain myself better, we review cases and we avoid further actions that are now transmitted to the rest of the system. And there's an example type of system. This high-risk system has a very high intensity level as well, and we don't want to create conflict or having more cases in the system. We saw this within the penitentiary federal system, and through cooperation agreements, and this is a parenthesis, we have a federal organization where we also have local and federal structures, provincial penitentiary services, and we are receiving complex inmates from local penitentiary services. We are analyzing, and given the criminal characteristics, we are including them in the high-risk system. So this creates in these penitentiary populations a safeguard for further conflict. So this is a system that requires resources, time, control, and we believe that it has its positive effects. Thank you. Diego? I think I would like to talk about the need for evolving as a public ministry, just so that we're up to the circumstances, particularly in Rosario. Organizations are changing. There's a traditional presence, of course, but we also see different organizations that are related amongst each other in different ways. They have third-party participants, logistics, distribution, manufacturing of drugs. So we need a serious and efficient implementation of these adversarial system around the country. It's very difficult to apply it with two different codes. Santa Fe is surrounded by provinces which have this mixed system. So if we have a case theory law and we design it with the security force and we have stakeholders that have different codes to be applied, this is complex. So we need to have an efficient system listening to everyone in the adversarial system, and also with the legislative. Prosecutors who ask for the application of the law, we need to be part of the drafting of these rules, because this will definitely be enriching the final product. And this will be a law that for the Ministry of Security, the police forces can promote, but also can be applied before the judges. Thank you, Diego. We have some final minutes left. I'm not sure if the members of foreign delegations would like to ask questions or comments to make. This is a time for Q&A. Guatemala, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. This presentation is very interesting. It coincides at least with the case of Guatemala and the behaviors within the penitentiary services to a great extent. In our case, the extortion at the security level is our highest issue. We have 17 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants, which is a lot higher than yours. And we calculate that 90% of these crimes are ordered from within the penitentiary services. So I think it's important to highlight two things. When what you found, these exit ways that you found, and we coincide in many of the elements that you've been working with, and we started working on them as well. And I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate you, to express our coincidence, but also to say that within the context of the Ibero-American states, we will have in October a gathering of all the penitentiary services in the city of Antigua in Guatemala. And this is an initiative by the Organization of Ibero-American States, because I insist, I think we have many points in common, but as you said at the beginning, the exits, the responses also have to coincide, and we need to learn from each of us. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Costa Rica, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. When you presented the Rosario case, I thought you were talking about Costa Rica, because it's almost exactly what we're going through. Let me add just one element. I am in charge of the penitentiary service myself, and we are working on the profiling on high levels of contention. We limit it, and I think we've been even stricter. But in Costa Rica, the main problem is those judges that have to execute the sentence. They are prevailing the rights of those in prison, and we are asked to reduce the effects of the conviction. We have the problem within our house, within our state, and we've been dealing with this because of the high rates of homicide, because we know that within the prisons, these networks continue to operate, to lead, to order crimes and homicides. So in an 18,700 inmate system, we've identified 153 criminal structures with 1,200 people that are deprived from their freedom, that are active within the prison. Our model for high containment of 2,000 people took us to a new project for a new prison called Center for High Contention and Organized Crime. But if we don't work together with the executive and the judiciary and the legislative, this won't change and this won't work. And it's not the same when the state does not safeguard the rights of all people. And we see this system that guarantee rights of those that have already been convicted and belong to a completely different type of criminality. And that's why I believe so firmly in our profiling system. We cannot have all the inmates within the penitentiary services in the same building. This containment measures are different, and at least we need to work on insertion processes. Good morning, and thank you. There's time for one more question or comment. I'm not sure where they're from. Ecuador. Thank you, and thank you for such important presentation. Based on the experience of what you're doing in Rosario, I think we continue to have the need for coordinated work. All the capacities, especially judicial capacities, and the work on the evidence submission, for example, and as Costa Rica very well mentioned, the exaggeration of the guarantee levels that are taking us to lack of capacities to have some concrete actions. Ecuador had to face organized crime with capacities that were really focused on ordinary crime. So we need to establish reforms in an anticipated manner, because this is very complex when we talk about criminal record checks, which are not visible, or people who are repeat offenders. These need special treatment in the judiciary. We should have a judicial fast-track system of those people, offenders who work with terror, with fear, with crime, and we cannot face it if we don't make radical changes around it. Thank you. This was definitely very interesting what the panelists shared with us, as well as the comments made by the delegations. I think we have a lot to work on, and together we will now wrap up this panel number 1. I was scared that the minister was going to be here and I would have to cut her down, but this didn't happen, so now we'll move to our next panel. Thank you.
Agradecemos.
Would like to thank the panel of experts as well as our moderator today.
Sono collegato.
Continuamos este encuentro con la conversación magistral.
So we will now continue with the next session towards effective criminal persecution against organized crime. I will be giving the floor to the facilitator, Mr. Emilio Pineda, manager of Institution for Development, IDB. Then we will listen to Nicola Grattieri, Chief Prosecutor, Naples, Italy, Mr. Antonio Nicaso, Professor of the Queen's University in Kingston, Canada, and especially author. He will be joining us virtually. Moderator, Paolo Di Sciuva, Magistrate, International Director of the ITAJUS program of the IILA, and Antonella Cavalieri, General Secretary of the IILA, who will be wrapping up the session. She will be joining us virtually as well. Thank you. Very good morning, dear ministers, distinguished authorities, guests. For me, it's an honor to kick off this panel on the Italian experience in a context marked by hard challenges in the areas of justice and crime. We want to focus on concrete experiences, shared practices, for us to better understand the fight against organized crime. We want to learn from other countries, from other regions. We want to become familiar with out-of-the-box approaches. All of this is essential to strengthen our capabilities, our response in the fight against organized crime. In the search of great examples, Italy is an undisputable benchmark. Italy has faced for many decades many organized criminal organizations like Cosa Nostra and Camorra through comprehensive strategies which have radically changed the global approach. The Italian experience shows it is possible to make progress and fight against criminal organizations thanks to the convergence of courage, social commitment, and new rules. For example, the adoption of anti-mafia laws, specialized prosecution offices, and effective cooperation with witnesses, for example, which have made it possible to dismantle organizations, something which seemed impossible. The work of prosecutors like Nicola Gratteri, we have the pleasure to welcome him. This has been fundamental, not only because of the scope of the proceedings, but also because of the structural reforms that have enhanced the independence and robustness of the Italian system. The Italian experience highlights the relevance of international cooperation and the exchange of information. This helps detect transnational phenomena. Latin America, no doubt, can find in the Italian model a great example to devise public policies, protection systems, and strategies. Against this backdrop, I have the honor to welcome great protagonists and experts who have personally experienced and engaged in the fight against organized crime. First, I will be giving the floor to the chief prosecutor of Naples, Nicola Gratteri, who has tirelessly fought the Italian mafia. He was involved in the work in Cansaro. He has been leading the prosecution office in Naples, the biggest in Italy. It is also a privilege to welcome Antonio Nicasso, professor from Queen's University, Canada, and an expert writer on organized crime, who has a deep understanding of the international operations of these networks. Moderator Paolo Di Sciuva, magistrate, international director of the ITAJUS program of the International Italian Latin American Organization. He has vast experience in international cooperation. And finally, comments by the General Secretary of the IILA, Antonella Cavallari, who will provide an institutional look. Let's make the most of this panel to get better acquainted with Italian experience so we can detect better practices and enhance our cooperation. Perseverance, interagency articulation, and legal innovation can transform the way we fight crime and lay the foundations for more resilient, effective justice. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Paolo Di Sciuva. Thank you for your presentation. Greetings to my friends and colleagues, the professor, the prosecutor, and the General Secretary and Ambassador Antonella. I will not be making a presentation. I have been living in Ecuador for the 3 years and involved in this project. The day I arrived in Ecuador, the first thing I thought when I arrived there was I had traveled back in time. I had gone back 30 years to face the same reality, the same sad stories. Now in Ecuador, I will show you a 1-minute video, very short, so you can understand what Italy faced in the 90s. The most powerful mafia, the Cosa Nostra. And these videos show the terrorist strategy implemented by Cosa Nostra, and then we'll give the floor to our Italian colleagues. Thank you. May 23rd, in a terrorist attack, the magistrate Giovanni Falcone, his wife, and 3 officers died. July 19th, second attack. Paolo Borsellino, magistrate, and 5 agents also died. May 26th, in another attack, an explosion, a car bomb, 277 kilos of explosives caused an explosion. Another case in Via Palestro, Milan. Died. 5 people died. July 27th, 2 attacks in Rome. 22 people hurt and injured. On behalf of everyone who has given their life for the state, I request that justice should be made. So, prosecutor, are you there? So, I will begin then. These are the images that describe the mafia operation back in the 90s. I think that apart from Calabria, these
potremmo cominciare da qui se ti pare. Non si ascolta, Nico.
Básicamente, ¿puedo continuar? La Cosa Nostra.
Lo que pasa es que están superponiéndolo. Cosa Nostra, through these terrorist attacks, well, this marked the beginning of the end, because back then we were even discussing the existence of the Italian state. The Italian state had to respond, and Cosa Nostra, the mafia, saw itself defeated because the leaders died. Oh, I would say it died as an idea. It was the demise of this idea. These forms of violence were defeated. The leaders of Cosa Nostra, today I would call them stupid. They were wrong, because the force, the courage of a leader does not lie in killing, but in scheduling, programming, making others understand. It's like driving your herd towards your goal. On that occasion, the Cosa Nostra was making a mistake. They did make a mistake. The leader showed he was, clueless. Some other men from Cosa Nostra came to Calabria to talk to 'Ndrangheta. Mancuso and other bosses. 'Ndrangheta said, no, no to this type of violence. Ndrangheta had already understood back in the 70s with the creation of La Santa, with a degree, certain level. This allowed the bosses to be part of Ndrangheta and Beatrix. With this masonry or Mason logic opened the door to professionals, law enforcement, and Ndrangheta had no interest in violence like Cosa Nostra. Ndrangheta became the most powerful mafia force, and it's present on all continents in the world. This mafia force acts like a monopoly. Cocaine importation from South America, for instance, they manage it. In the early 90s, there was evidence that Ndrangheta was selling to Cosa Nostra in Palermo and also Cosa Nostra in Catania. So, the structure of the Ndrangheta defeated their rivals. It's not easy to join Ndrangheta because they have like an enrollment system. It's a very difficult process. There are 2 or 3 patriarchal families making up this organization, and it's very difficult to find someone who has recanted. So Ndrangheta is present today in Colombia and other South American countries. We started seeing them as part of joint ventures, working together with Albanian mafia forces for cocaine importation in Europe. These violent acts have limited the state, and the state responds regarding regulations, operations. We have to show there was what we call a double binary, and 2 codes were prepared. That's what we call the dual or double binary. This is a procedure when I say code. For ordinary offenses or crimes and those committed by mafia forces. Well, there was a 6-month extension for mafia. So we can work without letting those involved in the investigation know. So we can bug phones more easily, for instance, to collect more evidence. And also the penalties are more rigorous, 20 to 30 years, longer convictions for the leaders of the organizations. But the most important thing is the rule for those who cooperate with the justice system, and Section 41 bis. In the case of these collaborators or cooperators, the Italian legislation does not require the individual to repent or to recant. He should say that within 6 months, he has to provide all the information he has, all the knowledge. So these cooperator, as we call them, is accommodated in a place with no contact with no one except for his or her lawyer. And this might be of use to those in the room. We have someone, an individual, who wants to provide cooperation, so this person is isolated, sort of sequestered. So when you do that, we use a camera in order to take a visual record. Everything is on videotape. the defending lawyer within the next 6 months. And then we make a short summary of all these topics. The important thing is that this person, this individual, has to share all her knowledge or information which is relevant to the case. And in the meantime, we conduct an interim or provisional program. This means this individual is mandated to say everything which has criminal relevance, to say the whereabouts of his money, hidden assets, who he or she has done business with, and in return, the state can provide protection. Yeah? On the spur of the moment, since the very beginning, her family is hidden away. Has to provide a list of those persons who might be in danger. And these people are sent to a safe haven.
No está.
If this person is not detained at the beginning of the process, this person will remain alone, isolated, so that there's no conditions upon the individual. The individual cannot be in contact with other judicial officials up until this period of 6 months has elapsed. Then this individual can go to the place where these cooperators are. The state would provide them with an apartment in the north or center of Italy with a low mafia presence. Once there, the cooperator in this area cannot call or get in touch with relatives or friends. No one is supposed to know where this person remains. This should be communicated through a third party or a reference party. And in each region of Italy, there's one reference, one chief, and each of them will know where they are. So the only person to know where, for example, in one of the regions of the center north of Italy, where the cooperator is the regional chief. If this cooperator needs to speak with the prosecutor or someone in the judiciary, or needs to find the wife, the lover, the girlfriend who is not part of the protected program, there is an exception through which the public ministry can authorize this communication or not. They can then meet, if approved, in a neutral place. This is not the regular place where the cooperator is or the place of residence of this woman in question, so that no one knows, or they don't know, where this person is, nor have relationship with them. This individual is provided with some resources to pay for money and other small expenses. This process is granted once this result is obtained in an appellate court. There's a clear sentence, a conviction, and as a result of their testimony, which are to be trusted as truth. One other important aspect is the change in generalities, and this is not quick or fast. This is aimed at children, daughters and sons. So the last name is changed, so personal data is changed. And these children are also counseled from a psychological perspective, leaving their group of friends and their familiar places is quite traumatic. So psychological counseling is provided. This is part of the law of justice cooperators. So once this process is over, because this process can take 4, 5, and up to 10 years, when these cooperators are more important or have a higher profile, the processes can take even longer. To some extent, the cooperator might leave the program. He or she will receive a sum of money, for example, in contribution towards a business project of them, so that they can start with a company, some sort of activity where they and their families can actually make a living off. In Italy, there's almost 730 mafia chiefs or bosses which have this type of process. As soon as this law was passed, the director of Penitentiary Services Department interpreted the law and make it or applied it in a softer manner. So this person in question is isolated for 22 hours in a very simple room with hygiene services. And then 1 or 2 hours per day, this individual can socialize together or with other 4 mafia members from different backgrounds. Cosa Nostra, Monghetista, and from the mafia foggiana. So this person can meet with bosses of other mafia organizations. Correspondence, I mean letters, anything that they send is controlled, as well as phone conversations with relatives are recorded and re-listened by the penitentiary police, because sometimes they send messages through neutral type of reasoning. They seem to speak about food or vacation time or some work-related matters, but instead they're actually sending codified or encrypted messages. So 41Bs has to do with recordings. Something else that is worth mentioning is that these justice cooperators cannot have any type of contact or make any phone calls, even if they are relatives, with other inmates that are not within the 41B's regime. These are people who have been detained but are not part of this regime, which is also important to mention. In-person questioning is performed through a glass. They speak on a phone. And if they have children that are younger than 12, and due to humanitarian reasons, the directors establish that these children can actually go on the other side of the glass to the room to hug their parents. In some cases, they found some bills, some notes in the underwear of these children, through which they sent messages to the outer world. Unfortunately, we see this type of cases within these 730 inmates distributed in different prisons. should be distributed into 4 prison units, and that would mean that we would have 4 interpretations of these Article 41Bs. If we distribute all of them in different prisons, we would have a lot more interpretations of the law. This structure is managed by a specific group, which is an elite group of the penitentiary services. This is specialized on mafia bosses because it has to do with psychological work. There's a nerves or stress war. This mobile operational group moves around every 3 months. They are never in the same prison so that we can avoid certain connivance or frequent encounters with the possibility of bribing or working together with police officers of these special units. So they rotate, they change locations. Let's move to the next question, please. I'm not sure if we continue with the prosecutor or we will change. I'm at your disposal. I'd like to add something else. I will be around for 1 more hour. It might be a better idea for me to finish with my presentation because I have another meeting later, and I can be here until 6 p.m. Italian time. That's great. If it would be possible to put the focus on the connection between 41Bs and the law on cooperators, because there are specific situations and conditions under which these people live in. These inmates. But this created the need for justice for the cooperator, because the court, the chiefs, the outer world, these are all stakeholders or players in the process. What I can add is that when someone is detained under 41Bs or is requesting to be asked questions under this process, they will have to submit and present everything they've done so far. If they share everything and the justice determines that it can become a cooperator, we've seen some individuals asking to cooperate, and under 41Bs asked to speak with me because they felt the need to repent themselves. I personally went to ask questions, and I rejected the protection system for some of them because the law prescribes that you need to inform of everything you know. For example, I was in the process of Nicolino Grandemandi, and he said, or he mentioned, he wanted to talk about 100 killings. Well, we said, well, 100 of them, that's a lot. But I didn't jump off my chair, I have to say, because I always recommend that before asking the questions, they have to study their criminal life. They have to study about all the information, all the reports from the police officers on the crimes committed by this person, and then go ask questions. Because then, otherwise, he wanted to talk about 100 homicides, but he didn't talk to me about his wife, daughter, and brother, who were also involved in that situation. After 5 or 6 sessions, I said, no, you cannot be part of the protection plan. Many times as well, I heard a camorrista. I sent my colleagues and then I went myself. And he would talk about many things, but not about what really happened in the Camorra, in the province of Caserta, which was very violent back then, and in the factories of the north, in the province of Caserta, they would remove tons of cancer material and toxic waste. This toxic waste poisoned the land, and in that sector, within all the families, we will find one or two members with cancer tumors. So I stopped him and I said, don't talk to me about that, but talk to me about the areas that we called the areas of fires. And how did we organize, or how did you organize the toxic waste in that area? He started changing the program, he started changing the story, so he didn't access the protection program. So even if they meet the requirements, we need to know exactly what has happened, what they've done, even the historical part of the criminals, an organization with other mafia members. If the mafia member does not present me with these facts, I cannot accept them into the program. I wanted to move to two other issues. I'm not sure if the application is clear. We have a double application for mafia members and these other type of criminals. I think this is one of the few latest laws. There was the application of the law on cyber fraud or cyber crimes. And I do want to share as well that the experience from 1986 to 2024 in Calabria, and to date, he is the most knowledgeable person in the field with the most dangerous mafia networks in Italy. But now in Napoli, he also had the opportunity to discover new things. Right? Yes, this is a very important law. And we have other things that fortunately we can't share, but this administration also worked on cybersecurity. In July 2024, cybersecurity crimes were considered mafia crimes. So this allows us to identify hackers, arrest them, and convert them into justice cooperators. And this is quite revolutionary, I should say. In 2024, this was the case of a hacker that hacked the Ministry of Justice in Italy. He took possession of hundreds of passwords of the judges. So he would read all the information in the morning and would block or stop some of the emails. This was controlled with great difficulty and professionalism by the police members. We arrested him, and he became a justice cooperator. We brought him a computer, and he accessed the dark web, and he shared with us how these crimes are committed. Behind his desk, or behind your desk, you can purchase 2,000 kilos of cocaine without even travel to Colombia, Bolivia, or Peru. So from prison, sitting behind a desk, you can buy 2,000 kilos of cocaine and decide to send it to Amsterdam, Rome, or anywhere around the world. This is quite revolutionary. He also mentioned and shared with us how he stole and earned bitcoins through the dark web and allowed us to seize 36 million euros that access the judicial system. And he decided to cooperate with the judiciary system, and he requested to be part of a special process. We could seize or recover this money that was now part of the assets of the state. This is a very important law. I do suggest that you continue studying it, because in the future, the heads of the mafia will actually be focusing on the use of the dark web. And it will be the AI and bitcoins that the mafias will use to commit crimes. We see in Europe a large reduction of homicides and a growth of the mafia in sectors with AI and the dark web.
I think this problem will also affect South American countries. If an Italian can send and deliver 2,000 kilos of cocaine to the port of Rotterdam or wherever, well, there might be someone in South America who can use the same technology to deliver these goods. And if there are people in Europe who can purchase cocaine on the dark web, there will be people in South America to sell tons of cocaine on the same dark web. So this involves us all, you and us. So we are completely willing to offer you all the technology that you may need or serve as bridges with our law enforcement forces. I think we should be properly equipped in order to provide a better response and react quickly against these looming future. I know that you in South America have the problem of cocaine production. We know that in recent years there has been a 20–30% increase in cocaine production, especially in Colombia. With Professor Nicasio, we visited the Amazon jungle to produce a documentary that will be shown in Italy on September 17th, roughly. But we have the feeling that in Colombia, there is a limited fight against cocaine producers. We have seen, on the other hand, lots of professionals working in the port of Cartagena. So at both ends, there are strict checks, but in the Amazon region, controls are rather loose. Well, I think that we have another 20 minutes, and we should be wrapping up. So, thank you very much for your explanations and remarks. So it's been very enlightening. Of course, we could speak months on end with the prosecutor, but of course we have to carry on. Thank you so much. So now, Professor Nicasio, how are you? I was proposed 2 topics. First, something the prosecutor has mentioned, the legislation on cooperators, allows us to better know the mafia from the inside. And a second topic might be the cultural fight. I mean, how important can this be? And I'm raising this because I know how you like working on these topics. You are a tireless researcher. And also, thirdly, a third topic, how we can cooperate, especially under the light of the Palermo Convention, and anything else you would like to add to this panel. You will be more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think it would be necessary to start off from deeper knowledge. I mean, deeper knowledge of this phenomenon. Because I think we are fighting a rather unknown phenomenon. We speak about violence, about measures being taken, but there is no accurate measurement or assessment of the phenomenon. One of the big abilities of these organizations is to relate to others, to connect. Normally, we track drug traffickers. We struggle against those associated to crime, but we do very little to fully understand that these people, without the help of professionals, politicians, experts, etc., can also would not be so lucky in their entrepreneurship, in their business. Sometimes we don't correctly assess this corruption. There is no mafia without corruption. So corruption and mafia should be addressed in the same fashion. I would also like to speak about violence. Italy has faced very violent times. Today, Latin America and the Caribbean hosts 9% of the world population, and there's 1/3 of murders. So we should consider this seriously, because violence is probably a characteristic of these events when criminal organizations start to gain a good reputation, which allows them to minimize the violence exerted. There starts a second stage, which has to do with infiltration and corruption. Let's think of LAC, and we think of everything happening there. There's something that is not easily explained. In the face of so much violence, there are criminal organizations that have evolved extraordinarily. I'm thinking of the first commander of the capital, which was born as a self-defense organization within Brazilian prisons. And today it's present in 24 countries. And they don't only keep a hold on certain territories, but they are also involved in international trade in drugs. And also they have managed, thanks to technology, to deal in cryptocurrencies. Yeah, I remember a hidden carbon operation. So we realized that these criminal organizations have at their disposal a bank, for example. They use it as a window to do business. This is something that we see increasingly often, and they have even invaded certain sectors. We should take these factors into account, and everything that has already been done in our countries. You have repeatedly mentioned the issue of justice cooperators, but a more effective tool is asset recovery. Yeah. And the law passed in 1982 gave Italy this possibility to make the mafia poorer through asset recovery. This has often seen in Italy, asset confiscation and recovery. We see that around the world, these strategies are not too effective because you recover under 2% of the wealth that criminal organizations have obtained illegally. So there is a necessity to update strategies, protocols to increase cooperation between countries, and especially there is a need for all of us to especially train investigators because they have to be familiar with their enemy and to prevent what's going on in Europe. There is a kind of asymmetry in legislation. Italy, for instance, has checks on the use of cash. Germany, not so much. So instead of investing here, they invest there. So, and this is happening in Latin America. What we would need is not only cooperation, but also global strategies to fight criminal organizations. We have to give a lot of value to human resources, the staff. And let's not forget the cultural aspect. Convictions are not enough. It is necessary to rid territories of poor people or people who are scared. Education is a long-term investment, but extremely useful to create awareness of the importance of fighting criminal organizations. What is especially useful is a dialogue, and this dialogue only takes place in theory but not in practice, because this dialogue should result not only in the disappearance of these areas, but this should result in a global struggle against crime. It's not enough to cooperate while investigating. We need a single common strategy against criminals and those associated with them, and also those who work with them, corrupt politicians, professionals, who are part of this criminal structure. Oh, I think we could speak for months with this professor. I know this because I always watch his videos. And I hope this is the first of very many more initiatives where we can all work together. Now I have to say thank you because we have to close this panel. Thank you so much, Antonio. And now I will have to give the floor to our Ambassador and General Secretary, Antonella Cavallari. Because, we speak about anti-mafia legislation. Sometimes we don't fully understand what that means. But, in Italy, this is different sometimes. It has to do with determination of ownership. But, we have the IILA, and I have the pleasure to introduce Antonella Cavalieri, which will explain what this international organization seeks to do. So, without further ado, I give the floor to our boss, Antonella Cavalieri. Thank you, Pablo. Greetings all. A pleasure to speak to you, to the panelists, the authorities, and everyone. It's an honor to be part of this event. I would like to thank Ana Maria, the Vice President of the IDB, and all of the IDB, as a matter of fact, because we have been working together since the Barbados rule for the creation of the Strategic Alliance. As a matter of fact, this organization is over 15 years of age, so with lots of experience in cooperation with Latin America. And we guarantee the mobilization of the best Italian experts. And today, Prosecutor Gatteri is a token of this collaboration and cooperation. The programs we have funded with Italian and European funds allows us to provide this assistance to Latin American colleagues. What we have been doing is to getting involved, organizing events, providing technical assistance at the IDB projects, for example, in Ecuador and Peru. But I think we can be even more effective. We can jointly work activities, initiatives. I know, a study visit to Italy, a visit by prosecutors and judges from Latin America. They can come to visit and see with their own eyes our reality. We can organize this through the IDB. I am just sharing this as a mere idea now. We can keep working with Ecuador as part of the program offered by the IDB for the country. In summary, I don't have much time, but I was closely following the words of the panelists, especially the explanations by the prosecutor about the justice cooperators system and regime and Section 41 bis. And I think that sharing this experience is of the essence. What I want to add is some information about the 5 involvement pillars or areas which are part of our focus. And this has been so in the last 10 years. These pillars have allowed us to attain concrete goals. First is operational cooperation between prosecutors and security forces. This leads to the effective application and implementation of the Palermo Convention. We have organized meetings in Palermo, Foz do Iguaçu, between Italian and Latin American prosecutors to exchange information about alliances between Latin American, European, etc., networks and organizations. And also what has been said, the creation of joint task forces or investigative forces. In the last years, we have supported joint task forces between Italy and Argentina, Italy, Brazil, Italy, Ecuador. A recent mission of prosecutors who visited some states in Brazil. And all of these have led to the signature of different cooperation agreements. Another agreement for a cooperation platform, Italy, Brazil, and Chile, for example. You see, this is the first pillar, cooperation. Second pillar, reforms, legislation reforms, which allows us to include this kind of mafia-style organization as criminal bodies. And including all of these details in the legislation. The prosecutor has described the evolution, the change in the mafia structures, and how dangerous is Ndrangheta right now. Things change, and we have to change as well, and we have to update the legislation. We have had a discussion with Argentina, which led to the passage of the anti-mafia law, and the cooperation we have and have had for the creation of the National Prosecution Office or Service in Chile, which is based on the Italian structure, and also with Argentina, the creation of a unit against drug trafficking in Mercosur. You see, important landmarks, and I have to thank all the prosecutors in Argentina and Chile who have been working side by side with us. The third pillar, the strategies to trace and persecute the financial proceeds of organized crime. Among the many goals attained in this area, I have to underline the support being given to the Joint Task Force on the finances of the Tren de Aragua, involving the prosecutors in Chile and Colombia. Also, the work of the task force of the Interpol on cyber notice in Latin America, trying to trace and recover illicit proceeds. And the special training sessions against money laundering and corruption. The
fourth pillar of our projects has to do with the regulatory reforms and training of the penitentiary services staff. When we talk about transnational organized crime, we can refer to the class that Ingrateri gave us, the complexity that he illustrated about treatment and management of justice collaborators was fantastic. And we put this system in the center of these policies because it's within the penitentiary premises that we can better detect and organize these activities. We need to train specialized bodies. For example, in Brazil, there's a constitutional amendment a few years ago that instructed the penitentiary authorities. In Ecuador, we promoted specialized penitentiary bodies in the management of those deprived from freedom that belong to organized crime. And we reduced considerably the number of murders and other disturbances in prisons. The project that he carried out is particularly related to this. We are currently working with the Ministry of Justice in Chile on the legislation that will apply the maximum security facilities in this country as well. This is a regime that has its own complexity. We heard about the interpretation that many understand of this Italian law and the 41Bs, and how the number of maximum security prison numbers should be reduced for better interpretation of this regime. And finally, the last pillar, this is the support to the assets recovered or by the state. And this is social, cultural, I should say. What Professor Nicasio said, it's important from a cultural perspective. And in that regard, we need to give citizens the feeling, the security, I should say, that the state is and the recovered assets from criminality might have a social and should have a social use. This will make citizens trust our laws and the fight against crime. The society needs to feel that we're giving them back what criminality took them from. So we have delegations of Brazil, Colombia, and Uruguay visiting the National Agency and Management of Recovered Assets to work on this. In summary, the idea is to have a specific, concrete contact between institutions, Italian institutions and Latin American institutions against organized crime. This is what we do. Thank you, or thanks to the friendship bonds, the deep knowledge of the institutions, both in Latin America and in Italy. And we become or have become the bridge that connects professionals and experts. And I hope I have provided you with specific examples of this. And I insist I'd like to continue working on the cooperation within this strategy and alliance for security, justice, and citizenship. Any contribution, any reform, any structural project needs from a previous technical assistance stage. And it's precisely this part where the ILA can activate a better experience from Italy in terms of contrast against organized crime. With that, I'd like to repeat that this action mode has been acknowledged in other areas of anti-corruption processes, training, institutional strengthening, legislative harmonization, and dissemination of values. Together, I believe we can achieve the greatest of success for the strengthening of democracies, the state of law, the citizenship, security, and be able to live in more fair societies that are developed in a sustainable manner. We are at your disposal, and thank you again for this opportunity. I'd like to thank the Secretary General, Nicola Gratteri, Antonio Nicasso, professor of Queen's University, and the time that you spent with us. I know that when we speak about anti-mafia laws, time is never enough, but I also like to thank the moderator, Paolo Di Scuvia, and comments by our General Secretary. I know time is up, but I'd like to thank everyone again for your time and your attention.
Agradecemos.
Thank you to the expert panel and the moderator.
Invitamos a todos a llenar la encuesta de...
We'd like to ask you to fill out the satisfaction survey. You'll find a QR code on your tables. You'll see it as well on the screens where you can fill out the online survey or the printed ones that are on the tables that you can fill out in writing. We'd like to invite you now to have lunch.